Welcome to the First Unitarian Universalist congregation of Terre, Haute. This congregation welcomes all people, regardless of their age, religion, race, nationality, ability, sexual orientation, gender identity or expression, or anything else that has been used to divide people. We are a group of people with our own opinions, our own ideas, our own dreams, but we share ideals. We share a common belief in a liberal religion. In our discussions, we may disagree with each other, but we must always remember that what unites us is stronger than what separates us. We must always end the service aware of the love that we have for each other.
Reverence and respect for human nature is at the core of Unitarian Universalist faith. We believe that all the dimensions of our being carry the potential to do good. We celebrate with gifts of being human, our intelligence and capacity for observation and reason, our senses and ability to appreciate beauty, our creativity, our feelings and emotions. We cherish our bodies as well as our souls. We can use our gifts to author love, to work for justice, to heal injury, to create pleasure for ourselves and others. Just to be is a blessing. Just to live is holy. The 20th century Rabbi Abraham Heschel wrote, Unitarian Universalists affirm the inherent worth and dignity of each person as a given of faith, an unshakable conviction calling us to respect ourselves and to respect others. Our opening words are on the insert in your program. We are here. From far and wide, we are here. From down the street and across town, we are here. From last Sunday and from 50 years past, we are here. From tomorrow, always tomorrow, we are here. With thanksgiving and with joy, we are here to celebrate this community and all that has been and all that will become. We are here. Wayne Arneson.
Here we have gathered side by side, circle of kinship, come and step inside. May all who seek here find a kindly word. May all who speak here feel they have been heard. Sing now together this our heart's own song. Here we have gathered, called to celebrate days of our lifetime, matter small and great. We of all ages, women, children, men, infants and sages, sharing what we can. Sing now together this our heart's own song. Life has its battles, sorrows and regret, but in the shadows let us not forget. We who now gather know each other's pain. Kindness can heal us as we give, we gain. Sing now in friendship this our heart's own song.
Please join me in the Transitional Words, number 646, in the back of our hymnals. It's called The Larger Circle. If you would read the italicized words. We clasp the hands of those that go before us.
And the hands of those who come after us.
We enter the circle of each other's arms.
And the larger circle of lovers whose hands are joined in a dance.
And the larger circle of all creatures.
Passing in and out of life, who move also in a dance.
To a music so subtle and vast that no one hears it.
Except in fragments.
And now I'd like to introduce our very own Sara Laughlin. She's been a member of the congregation for a very long time, and she's an art teacher and a wonderful person. Sara.
What a week, and a month, and a season, and a year. Wow. I sometimes feel I'm living in the twilight zone, and I guess I'm going to bet some of you feel the same way. I'm preparing a series of photos here, or a collection of framed groupings of things of our different eras of the congregation, and this is one that I still want to tweak, and it's about the founding. And there are just a few pictures there. There's one at the top of the YMCA that's not in business right now. Hopefully it'll be refurbished. But the first meetings were very casual there in 1954. And then on January 9th, yesterday being the anniversary, in 1955, the group finally decided to be committed and to sign a charter, and a list of names are on a, this is a photocopy of an old typed letter that I found in the archives. There's a picture of the first anniversary dinner. There is a picture of an anniversary or a picnic after the first anniversary in that summer. And then there's one in 1958, which I'm believing is another anniversary dinner. There is a rather stout man in these pictures who was Reverend Don Thompson. A photo of him is on the back wall, and he's the one that's given the credit for bringing together some people who were not very familiar with a denomination that really didn't even exist at the time. There were two different denominations. The Unitarians and the Universalists were separate denominations at the time. But we have these interesting photos. As I was organizing, I was looking at them, and some of them, very few at this point, I knew. And there are some in these photographs that I had heard of. And I know that, like us, they all had their own personal little challenges. They had issues within their households, within their families, within their community, and they certainly had shared challenges beyond our local community. But in those pictures, there are a lot of smiles. And that's what we do. We smile for the camera. The theme from my presentation wasn't in the program, but I had chosen the unseen of our founders' photos. That even though they're smiling, there were some big challenges that they had. And I thought, this is a reminder for all of us that there are seasons and there are changes and there are challenges. There will always be challenges. Sometimes we get to a plateau and we think, okay. But we have to be adult and know that there are always going to be things that are going to be confronting us somewhere up the road. They're smiling, but in the 1950s, if you know anything about the 1950s, these people had in their minds some very grave concerns. In 1955, there was an epidemic. There was a polio virus. In 1955, things had settled down a little bit, but in Washington, people were sort of regrouping, recovering from McCarthyism. There was in 1955, for sure, a Cold War going on between Russia and the United States and our allies. There was in 1955 racial tension. And there was, of course, in 1955, religious cultural separatism. These people were all experiencing those things on one level or the other. I've not heard the polio era as being a pandemic, but it certainly was an international thing. And one of the things that was particular about it, right now we're sort of focused on the older people being more vulnerable, as well as certainly others with certain conditions, but not so much with children. But with polio, children were greatly impacted. So these people were concerned about their children and what would be the impact, were their kids going to get it. There was eventually a vaccine, but it took a good while, and it was a very stressful time thinking about polio. Is there anyone here that has a connection to Riley, Indiana? I think you do. When I entered Riley School, and then it was high school, grades 1 through 12, in a previous building to the one that I think you attended. Sounds like I went to a one-room schoolhouse when I say I went to a school that was grades 1 through 12, and it was 1 through 12, no kindergarten even then. But when I entered the first grade, on the first day of school, there was a little boy in my class named Timmy. And Timmy had braces on his legs. And that was something that I hadn't seen before. Walking was very difficult for him. When he sat down, he had to loosen these little latches on his braces so that he could bend his knees and sit down. And when he needed to stand up, he had to sort of fuss with them a little bit and get them to snap into place so he could stand. When the rest of us would run on the playground or run in the gym, Timmy had some sort of an awkward skip that he would use, and he couldn't do what we were doing. When I saw the movie Forrest Gump decades later, there's a scene, if you've seen the movie, where Forrest is running from some bullies, and he's running so fast that his particular braces broke and the straps came off, and then he could run like crazy, and he ran forever after that. And I remember thinking, gosh, I wish that could have happened for Timmy. I had for a long time a scar on my shoulder. Does anyone have the memory of having that little scar? No little scar. You got a big scar. And my scar from the vaccine that I eventually was able to have has faded, but I sure had that scar for a very, very long time. And by the time I got to high school, it was basically invisible. And Timmy, by that time, didn't have braces on his legs, but he still had challenges that faced him the rest of his life. Oh, that's interesting. That's interesting. Yes. Timmy was one of the first in our class to pass away, but he didn't pass away for that, but he did have challenges with this the rest of his life. McCarthyism. I don't have a personal memory of McCarthyism, but I learned certainly about him later. And in 1955, when our founders were gathering and having these celebratory gatherings, they knew well the impact that had had, and that there were people who had been, whether or not they were or they weren't, they were targeted as being communists and left scars with them. There were blacklists, and people who couldn't get a job. They couldn't get housing, perhaps even, if you had that label of communist being hung over your head, whether you were or you weren't. Something about unfair allegations, untruths, things that we have that we might be able to identify with today. Accusing someone of being a communist was just, pointing a trigger at them, and it still carries over today. If you're accused of being a communist or a socialist, there is a label that has stuck with that since the 1950s that some people won't let go of. Now, I do remember the Cold War. I might not remember Joe McCarthy, but I do have memories of the Cold War and the fear that Russia, the USSR, would drop an atomic bomb on the United States. Do any of you have memories of bomb drills? You know, we have all kinds of drills in the schools now. I teach at West Vigo High School. We have fire drills, we have tornado drills, and now, unfortunately, we have active shooter drills. But we don't have A-bomb drills any longer. But in the 1950s, across the United States, there were drills instructing students to get under their desk, cover their head, duck and cover drills, they were called, to prepare yourself, simulate what you would do if an atomic bomb was dropped. Now, those little wooden desks, we're not going to do a lot, but there's something within human nature that we want to do something, and so we want to have our children, be prepared, have them think that there's some hope. My school was relatively near Holman Field, and the Indiana National Guard established in 1954, a year before these folks got their charter going. In 1954, the 113th Tactical Fighter Squadron was stationed at Holman Field. They'd be doing training exercises there regularly. And planes flew over, or in the area of my school, became rather regularly. Now, back then, test pilot Chuck Yeager had in 1945 broken the sound barrier, and with his, having flown faster than the speed of sound. And in the 1950s, it was a thing. And in their practice sessions, the Air Guard would break the sound barrier. Now, if you're a little child in an elementary school, and one of those loud, clash, thundering claps happens, a sonic boom, rattling the glass, big glass windows in your classroom, we thought it was the bomb. I cannot tell you, and even though our teachers would assure us and say it was okay, and it was just, it's just the noise from the airplanes, and we're going to go back to our work, there is a memory of that I remember all these years, maybe 60 years later, about the horror, the panic that we felt because we thought a nuclear bomb was being dropped. Is this it? Is that what it's like? Even though, now, a sonic boom will scare you anyway. It's just a loud, unexpected noise. But back then, there was a little extra level of horror actually relating to it. Some of these people in these pictures were associated with Indiana State University. And that's of interest here because back in the 50s, certainly, racism was for sure a thing. In terms of segregation in 1869, Indiana had passed a legislation that there would be no integrated schools, that there would colored people, as it was the term at the time, there would be colored schools and there would be white schools, and they wouldn't intermix. Integration, I learned, started in Indiana in 1949, the year I was born. But it didn't filter down for a while. Even after Brown versus Board of Education in 1954, it took a little while for people to get wrapped around that. I'm not sure when the last completely, quote, colored school was in Terre, Haute, but I think it was maybe 1957. Lincoln Elementary that became Ben Franklin, I think. I know high schools were integrated before that. But in terms of ISU, an interesting thing I think about our founders is they're sitting there, and they, I'm sure, had feelings about this. Is anyone familiar with Coach Howard Wooden? He got great fame for being the coach at UCLA. Big, celebrity in the sports world. He started his college era at Indiana State College at the time. In 1946, he qualified because his team was so good to go to a national tournament, the NAIA at the time. He declined to go because he was not going to be allowed to take a colored boy on his team. He couldn't participate in that national basketball tournament because his team had a boy who was colored. I think of the courage that it took for Howard Wooden, a young coach, to deny his team or his college the recognition to go to a college tournament, and he said, we ain't going. The next year, he was asked again. The team qualified to go to this big national tournament. And there was some sort of compromise. There was some back and forth, and he did agree, though with assistance from the NAACP, he was allowed to have his boy play in the tournament, but he sure couldn't stay in a hotel in Kansas City. So there was a compromise, and the young man's name was Clarence Walker, and he was the first person of color to play in a national basketball college tournament. These people, those who taught at Indiana State at the time, would have known about this, and I'm trusting they would have been very, very proud of that. The founder of our congregation here, Don Thompson, is in these photos. You can see him. He's the stout person. And when he left here in 1960, after he felt that this congregation had sort of gotten started and he could trust that he could go on, he experienced racism really in his face in a very, very big way. When he went to Jackson, Mississippi in 1960, to head the First Unitarian Church of Jackson, he was well received by some in the community, but not so much others, because he welcomed colored people to come into his church, and that was a big no-no. He had all kinds of threats, and on a night in 1965, after getting attention from the Ku Klux Klan, there was an assassination attempt on his life, and he was shot in the back, and he did recover, but he had some bullets in his back from that incident. And he did leave Jackson because of all the death threats on his congregation and on his family. He was determined to stay, but the national organization suggested that he go and take an appointment somewhere else to cool that down. So these people in this picture experienced racism in a very direct way, Reverend Thompson especially having been shot. This sort of blends, my thoughts about this, about religion, were sort of thinking and appropriately about the political attention that's being given right now and interaction between political and religious challenges. Does anyone, this is a teacher in me asking me these questions. 1955, they would have been preparing for the next presidential election the next year in 1956. Does anyone know who ran for president in the Democratic ticket in 1956? Yes, I was going to guess one of these two over here would know. Adlai Stevenson. Adlai Stevenson. He ran in 1952 and 1956 against Eisenhower and was soundly defeated. Eisenhower, a big general after World War II, was a hard person to beat. If you Google Adlai Stevenson and religion, what will pop up is Unitarianism or Unitarian Universalist. There will be something apt to be related about that. Now, did he campaign, have that as something that he used in his campaign? Oh, no. I don't remember which denomination, maybe Presbyterian, I forget, but he ran being promoted as a traditional Protestant person, knowing that if he went out there sharing his fundamental beliefs of Unitarian or Universalism, that would have made him lose even worse. So he did not campaign on that. He wanted to run and put his name out there for 1960, but the Democratic Party chose someone else for 1960. So who ran as a Democrat in 1960? Kennedy ran against Nixon. Now, does anyone have a recollection about what there was about Kennedy? See, you know, he was Catholic. It wasn't that he was so rich or that he was this or that he was that or he had a reputation as a playboy, but he was a Catholic. But he won, the first non-Protestant president of the United States. Significantly, we've loosened up about, you know, in some ways about that, but certainly in 1955, religion was, even if you were a type of Christian, it was still a challenge. I remember John Laska, when I was graduating from ISU and getting ready to go out into the real world, John said, don't put Unitarian Universalism on a resume. Whatever you do, don't do that. And it took me a long time. Well, that's not asked on resumes now anyway. But he gave me that advice, and I sort of stood with that for a very, very long time. So our founders witnessed these things. They had things that troubled them, that concerned them, that challenged them. Their life wasn't just sitting and social gatherings and having fun and fellowship. They had some very, very big challenges. Today, we have challenges that parallel theirs, but maybe even in a bigger way in some ways. The pandemic that we have has more impact on daily life, I will have to say, than in 1955. That was bad. It affected children. It was serious. And there were lives lost, but not on the impact and affecting our economic situation and the whole big thing. I don't even have to go into the political things. I don't even have to go there. You know, we have some very, very big challenges that are going to take a very long time to recover from. When Mikhail Gorbachev led changes in the Soviet Union so many years ago and the Berlin Wall came down, I never thought I would see that in my lifetime. But sometimes there are good things that happen that we don't even see them coming up the road, and then the clouds part and the sun comes out, and we can trust that we'll have days like that. From all the progress that we made, we can look on a basketball tournament on television, and whatever tournament that is, we're going to have persons of color playing on those teams. So we've made advances in so many, many different ways, and yet we still have to remind people that Black lives matter. As far as religion goes, what denomination is Joe Biden? Catholic. Did anybody ever make a big deal about that during the election? And what is the religion of Kamala Harris's husband? I thought he was Jewish, and I think Jewish. And whatever, that really came in under the radar screen because it certainly, if it wasn't Protestant, that would be bait for the conversation, but it didn't enter into it. So last Sunday on Facebook, a teacher friend of mine who has had a particularly challenging year, on top of everything else that everybody else had, has had a really big package of other things. And last Sunday, she posted this little quotation on Facebook. And it says, "I've learned a lot this year. I learned that things don't always turn out the way you planned or the way you think they should. And I've learned that there are things that go wrong that don't always get fixed or put back together the way they were before. I've learned that some things stay broken. And I've learned that you can get through bad times and keep looking for better ones, as long as you have people who love you. I don't know if these people felt they all loved each other. They might have had little personal conflicts between each other as just human nature, but they sure valued their relationship. And I'm going to feel very confident that they felt that they had people that assured them, that understood their challenges, personally or beyond. They had people that shared common beliefs, and they certainly had people share their search for truth and the appreciation for things that are true. I feel as a country, and even as a denomination, we all have long roads ahead of us, and we don't know exactly in our personal lives, in our church life, in our community, in our national life, we don't know exactly where these roads are going to go. But I hope we all feel that we have support here from each other to help us walk that road. And I trust that with all these challenges, when there are pictures taken of us, there will be smiles on our faces.
Our closing words are by Priscilla Murdoch. As we bring to a close our tribute to the journey we have made through the years, let us be mindful of the enduring bond that keeps us together. Let us remember those who went before and paved the road for us to travel. Let us remember our pioneers with admiration and gratitude, with honor and with joy. Memories are for us to cherish and to share. The future is for us to mold together. Let us be about that work.